I was giggling actually. We definitely align on the high energy and positive vibes. So yeah, it was a pleasure to be invited on. No matter how many excuses you make, like I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to moderate, I'm going to start going to bed early, I'm going to get this done, it's on you. I was drinking more because I was dealing with negative energy, negative moments, negative clients, because you attract the wrong clients and you create the wrong type of relationships.
Hi everyone, welcome back to a new episode of Dare to be Fearless. I took, I think last week and perhaps the week before that off of the podcast as I got back to London after speaking at Harvard. If you came to the Harvard talk, thank you for coming. It was honestly a career highlight. I met some remarkable people, not only students, but also people that I spoke next to. I did a keynote in the morning and then I did a panel with two people that I want to shout out that you guys should absolutely connect with on social media. One was Binta Brown. She's a partner at Minot, which represents some massive people who are in the talent and media world. And then Angelina Lawton, she is the founder of a really big sports agency called Sports Digita. And during the panel, we really spoke a lot about how to be resilient in business, how to reach out and get in front of the right people, along with a lot to do about finances. I didn't realize actually prior to this panel how much of an opportunity there is in sports. So if you're watching this and you're like, I don't know what to do for a living, then certainly not only connect with them on social media, but I think that looking into that industry, people who are leaders in it, potentially coming up with your own job role could be really beneficial. So before I introduce today's guest, make sure to follow Dare to be Fearless on social media, which is at Dare and the number 2 Be Fearless, as well as my personal social media, which is Alexa_Curtis. And if you guys want to get any Chief Swag mic covers, we sell them everywhere now, officially on Amazon. The official website for Chief Swag is chiefswagofficer.com, as well as TikTok, Instagram Shop, and everywhere. So a few months ago, I had on Oliver, and he started an agency called Flight Story with Steven Bartlett, and he's now left that agency since he came on the episode. But he posted something, I think on Instagram or LinkedIn, with who I have now today, and I went through everything Sam had done and was like, wow, this guy is so cool. And then I messaged you, but you were traveling for a while, and I finally got to connect with him, and he was just not only so cool, but immediately upon when I met him, I felt like I could connect to him on this level that I can't necessarily connect with everyone who's an entrepreneur, because I think there's different types of entrepreneurs. Some act a little bit more manic, some act a little bit more chill, and I felt like we were really on the same vibe of just operating on that higher frequency. So I'm welcoming today Sam Budd. He is the founder and CEO of Buddy Media Group. He has worked with some massive brands, and I want to talk specifically to him, I think, about how to overcome a lot of the building blocks that people go through in childhood and becoming resilient to do what you've done with your life. So thank you for coming in today.
Thank you. Yeah, I was I was giggling actually. We definitely align on the high energy and positive vibes. So yeah, it was a pleasure to be invited on.
And I don't want to use the word like manic, because that can obviously, if you have a mental health disorder and you experience mania, it's different. But I think that sometimes I do find I operate in that state when I have really high highs and really low lows with business. And so I think I can relate to people who can have that same vibe. And so I just find that interesting, because I think there's different types of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Well, I think also when you're around energizers, right? If you're extroverted and you're an energizer and you meet another one, you actually get energy from someone. So a lot of people feel drained at times, particularly if they're introverted from too much social interaction, whereas I'm like, it's almost like a Duracell bunny that gets supercharged when I'm around people like you. So yeah, no, I'm excited about today.
But when you're alone then, do you like to just zen out, or you still operate in that way?
No, I actually really struggle to be on my own. It's like a running joke.
Really?
Yeah, so if I'm like, if I'm away, abroad or whatever, and I'm working and I'm in a hotel or something, I will just be manically trying to figure out who I can meet or connect with, or I'll even go downstairs and, make friends or interact, just because that's kind of a strength, and B, part of, kind of part of my childhood in terms of kind of always feeling like I need to connect. So yeah, there's some interesting stuff around that which we can talk about.
I didn't know when I met you how traumatic your childhood was. I mean, you've gone through so much before getting to the place you're at now. So growing up, did you expect to become an entrepreneur? Were you on this path?
No, well, I mean, Jesus, I suppose, when I look back, you can almost look at these stages like in retrospect and think, oh, actually there's key moments. But, I think my childhood, it was traumatic. It was also brilliant in so many ways. And I deeply believe that it's kind of made me who I am. Particularly, you talked about resilience, at Harvard. And like, I think resilience is built through hard lessons in life and kind of having to fight for things, to really make them happen. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, as a child, cutting straight into it, I suppose it was difficult. I was born into a really, really difficult situation. My dad was a heroin addict. He actually used to be on the Olympic swimming team, got polio, ended up going to Paralympic swimming team, but got bullied at school, ended up taking or being given morphine to deal with that. And then unfortunately he ended up becoming a heroin addict off the back of it. And my mum was drugs and alcohol counsellor. The classic trying to help, met dad through, rehabilitation process. They fell in love, they had me. But yeah, unfortunately, my early days as a kid was, being surrounded by needles and other heroin addicts and a very kind of chaotic and hectic environment. And I think that manicness, that need to always be with people, part of that is about the feeling of kind of not having self-worth or not having the kind of level of attention that I suppose I yearned for. I don't know if I needed it, but I certainly yearned for it because there was so much focus on trying to keep control of my dad. And then, yeah, unfortunately, my brother went off the rails, but I found out he was my half brother eventually, which I'll get to. But he went off the rails, was in and out of prison, ended up doing a stint for 5 years. The day he came out, he overdosed on heroin with my dad, died in my dad's arms, which was pretty heartbreaking. And yeah, I found out he was my half brother. Found out I had like 4 or 5 other half brothers and sisters, which was kind of crazy. But, I think I was 13 at that point. So you can think about that age and what you're going through. And then, yeah, I started to spiral, I suppose. And, it sounds unbelievable, but unfortunately then, my mum met another person, John, who was an ex-heroin addict, had a very abusive relationship with his parents. He was then quite emotionally and, he was quite abusive in certain ways as well. So I had to kind of deal with that, got moved out of Bristol, which is where I was born, to Cornwall, which I'll get onto because that basically saved my life. And then unfortunately my dad ended up getting beaten up in a bit of an exchange, something to do with drugs, and then died of pneumonia when I was about 18. And that sent me off the rails again. So just as I kind of started to find my feet and get control. And then I had a massive car crash to the point where I couldn't walk. I used to be like top 10 surfer in the UK, like sponsored. It was my life, like living on the beach. Like I have no idea how I've come from surfing, lifeguarding, surf instructor, competing surfing to where I am now. Yeah. But I had to make a decision. And I think one of the biggest things was like, am I going to allow this world to fuck me up, right? Am I going to allow myself to follow in the feet of my brother, my dad, my stepdad, and let my mum down, let myself down, and let the people around me, or actually am I going to start figuring out why I'm reacting the way I am, why I've got these insane outbursts of anger, frustration, energy, to the point where I was so overwhelming. I used to get I got expelled from 3 schools growing up, had to get home taught for 6 months. When you say manic, like, I was about as out of control a child as possible. And yeah, I suppose that the moral of it is that everyone can have a sob story, and like, my big thing that I have is that, like, just because of my trauma, people might listen to this and think, oh, it's really sad or really stressful, but that doesn't take away from other people's trauma. Like, that can come from just being told not to play the piano because it's annoying for someone that loves music. That can impact them just as much as the stuff I've got. And I think everyone's trauma and stresses are as valuable and as significant as someone else's.
When you look, I mean, it's insane. Your story is like out of a movie. It's like listening to you and then trying to grasp how I know you now to think of those situations you went through and over that period of time. Do you feel like, looking back, you grew up alone? I mean, do you feel like you had people in your corner, or were you acting out in a way to kind of get attention? It was like a call for help.
Yeah, I mean, look, listen, my mum, Nikki, she, if you met her, you'd immediately know she's my mum, right? Like, she's just hilarious. Like, her mannerisms and her kind of chaotic but incredibly kind of loving mannerisms are something I'm really proud of, and I think that I've taken that and learnt from her. But she was super supportive, and I think this is where you really have to have empathy for single parents or people that don't have that support network around them, because she had to try and be 2 parents, and like, my gran was incredible, and she was definitely helped bring me up, but mum was, she made some interesting choices and then and obviously, as I was growing up, I was dealing with my stepdad, who was a really bad alcoholic, and it was tough. There were some really dark days and some horrible days, but the big thing is that when I was in Bristol, I didn't have community, and that was when I was at my peak off the scale. Like, really, I'm heading towards prison at that point. Got arrested by the police, really considered, like, a lot of potential prison time moments. But then when I when I moved to Cornwall, it like totally changed, because the difference with Cornwall for me is the community aspect of it, is that everyone is there to support everyone, and you kind of congregate around the beach. And so if you think, I don't know, a typical sort of 9-year-old boy, which is when I moved to Cornwall, you will grow up around 9-year-old, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, maybe up to 15-year-old people. Whereas I was growing up surrounded by people that were 60 years old or people that were 40, because everyone was around the beach. And so you kind of learn their mannerisms, how to engage, how to respect people. There was a lot of respect and a lot of kind of principles instilled in me in Cornwall, and I think that I'm biased, but if you meet pretty much anyone from Cornwall, I think you'll often see these really deep rooted kind of community values, principles that are instilled, and I think that comes because you were just educated from grown-ups at a young age to be held account. And when you are taking the piss or being naughty or doing things wrong, someone's mum will pick you up in the car, put you in the car and drive you to your mum's house. And at that age, that is the worst possible thing that you can imagine. And so it just stops you in your tracks and helps you align. And I think, it's a big discussion and a big, kind of talk that I talk about with my partner, is like, where is the right place to bring up your child? And, if you are going to bring your child up in a city or in an environment where the community isn't as strong, how do you instill that community, those values and those principles into someone's life? Because really, I think that's the only reason why I'm here talking to you as a CEO of a multi-million-pound business, these behind bars in Bristol.
Well, probably the parents, right? Like, would you say it's the parents that can give you those skills?
I think the parents are one part of it. I think it's actually your environment. It's, you know, and I think this is what I mean. It's like, you know, think about where you spend your time, the teachers, right? Like at your school, the teachers, you know, how are they, you know, what are their mannerisms? What are the values that they're instilling? The kids' parents, the people that you spend your time with. Because actually, you know, you spend a lot of time with your mum. In my case, my mum, didn't really try to avoid my stepdad. But they are going to give you their projection of how they believe you should be as a child, like as an adult. And a lot of that comes from trauma, from how their parents have taught them to grow up. And I think that's a really powerful way of getting support. But I don't think it gives you that triangulation of like different approaches to life and mannerisms and communication.
Yeah, I've done a lot of work and research over the years to try and understand this victim mentality. And I think that when you grow up in the way that, for example, you did, or like I didn't have the same stuff happen, but like on the same level of trauma, it's very hard to not view yourself as a victim. So I'm always so curious, why do certain people go on to do like what you and I have done instead of end up in prison or really fuck up their whole life? I mean, do you think it's something that you're either born with that tenacity or that you kind of grow out of it?
You know, Ross Anderson, who I'll get on to, you know, he's a psychologist that I'm working with both personally and at Buddy. And he talks about the fact that if you don't have the information, it's not your fault. But if you do have the information, it is your fault. And the idea is that everything is on you as an individual and you can blame everyone else for the outcomes that you've got. But when you have the tools or the awareness of things that you can do to change and you don't pursue those, that's on you. And so, for example, I had a massive car crash. You know, I've got a scar, like lost part of my internal, you know, like it was, I couldn't walk for a month. Like it was bad, you know, hit a wall at 60 miles an hour as a passenger when I was 17 years old, very nearly died, just to add to my mum's stress levels at that time. But I had PTSD from that, and I went to CBT to try and figure out how, because I couldn't get back in a car, which is crazy for someone that's quite high risk. But the CBT opened my eyes to that type of support being available, and we ended up quickly moving on to why I had anxiety, what was triggering outbursts. And so I was then aware. So I had that information, I was aware, and I decided to lean in and pursue that. And so I've been working, you know, since 17 years old, and I wish I'd done it sooner. I wish I'd done therapy, proper therapy, when my brother died, because, you know, at 13 years old, I basically nearly screwed up my entire life up until that point. But what CBT therapy, which is cognitive brain therapy, it's essentially looking at, you know, I think therapy is really amazing, but it's addressing previous historical moments to understand them, and then trying to, you know, move forward away from them. Whereas, and I think that's really powerful. Whereas, because I'm an extrovert and I want to take action at all times, CBT is about giving you frameworks and like strategies for dealing with challenges.
Yeah.
And so, like, a perfect example is like, you know, everyone says bad things happen in free, right? Dr. Gabor Mate talks about that is a traumatic, typically a childhood moment where something bad happens and it draws you back to a previous state where it triggers you, and then you allow the next 2 and 3 things to happen, whereas actually bad things happen in one. And if you've got coping strategies to deal with that moment when something bad has happened, and go, okay, I feel triggered right now, I probably need to go for a walk because I'm going to go into a meeting. Whereas if you don't go for that walk, you go into a meeting, you have an argument with your colleague, you kick off with a client, you then have a conflict of some sort, that triggers you, you go spiraling out, you then go out and, I don't know, you go off the rails and you get drunk, or you get in a fight, or whatever happens, then you're facing losing your job, then you're facing, you know, criminal charges, whatever it is. That's an extreme, but actually that's all come off the back of that one bad thing that you've not addressed at that time. And the idea is that and the thing that I strongly believe, like, again, like, people out there, Dr. Gabor Mate, you know, like Jordan Peterson, they all talk about, you know, frameworks and coping strategies, but I can only give my personal opinion. But my personal opinion is there's too much focus right now in the industry, in the world, of dealing with a problem when the problem's happened, right? So we're all addressing the fire, like when things are on fire, but we're not thinking about the moments that we can do to stop that fire starting. And I think if there's one thing that I want to pursue in my career, and if I can use my platform, Sam Buddy Media, is to help people get ahead of that, to go, I feel triggered, what are the coping strategies, breath work, all these different things that you can go out and do to stop that.
I've been in therapy for years, and CBT is like one of the best. I think that's one of the most renowned forms of it for dealing with certain types of trauma. I feel like the techniques that I've gotten from my therapist, if it's the right therapist, I've really been able to make a difference in my life. But you have to also be really ready, right, to not only like deal with a certain type of trauma, but also to change it. I have friends that are like, I'm going to therapy and it's not working. I mean, your therapist cannot give you the answers. They guide you in the right direction, but no one can give you the answers besides you. So it's funny when people are like, oh, it's not working, or like, what do I expect? It's like, how much do you want to change?
It's so accurate, Alexa, because I think the problem with everyone is there's always an excuse. Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, for example, I'm doing Stoptober at the moment for the first time in my life.
Which means you don't drink.
Yeah, not drinking, like just trying to reconnect with myself, like re-stabilize, because, you know, I might look cool, calm and collected and got all my shit together. You know, it is definitely the swan analogy of chaos going under. And I think, you know, again, the big thing with like with coping strategies and finding it's not just done, just like doing Stoptober. That isn't going to solve my destructive tendencies when I'm stressed to go out and get hammered, right? Mm-hmm. And look, I'm going to be completely honest. It's the only way I can be. It's like, what do I do when I'm under pressure? We're dealing with cash flow issues. Clients are doing unacceptable things or dealing with us in an inappropriate way. I've got family troubles. My world personally and professionally is on fire. Guess what? It's very easy to go and escape and get hammered and go and, you know, send it and just cut loose and kind of have that escapism. And you've got to make that decision, because everyone can give you the excuse, oh, okay, well, that's understandable, you're stressed. But you've got to decide. And so that's why in the last 12 months, I've been working with Ross and Rob Eads, both of them. And again, I'm, you know, very privileged to be able to have that kind of support now. But their number one goal is to actually moderate me, right? Get me back. You know, Oliver, if he watches this, who I work with, Social Chain, my name was Mr. ABC, right? Mr. Always Be Closing. I was just this absolute relentless sales machine, traveling all across the world, closing deals, just burning people out around me. Whereas now it's like Mr. ABC, Mr. Always Be Calm, right? Not cracked that yet. I'm not going to lie, I've not cracked it. But the idea is I'm trying to find a way to moderate myself, but I'm doing that for me. Yeah. And the reason why is because I want to make sure that I can turn up for my team, the people I care about, I love, turn up today, be ready to have this chat, like be calm, hopefully add as much value. If I was manic Sam and I'm coming in and twitching around, you're not going to get the value and we're not going to have success. So yeah, I think that the summary of it, slightly long-winded, is like, no matter how many excuses you make, like, I'm going to stop smoking, I'm going to stop drinking, I'm going to moderate, I'm going to start going to bed early, I'm going to get this done, it's on you. And that is the biggest thing that I've challenged. I've always made an excuse. All the training, all the podcasts, all the books I've read, for really, you've just got to make a decision and lean into it.
Someone I admire so much is Andy Dunn. He founded this company called Bonobos. I don't know if you have it in the UK. It's like a very famous men's pants brand, and they sold it for him and a co-founder like 330 million. Wow. But he's got this book called Burn Rate, and he was diagnosed bipolar, but he wasn't diagnosed while he was building this company. And he talks a lot about like when he would have the highs and the lows. I mean, he would go to drinking or just blacking out, and it's like phenomenal to read the fact that this guy was able to raise such mass amounts of money being hungover and like dealing with all of this. But the thing is, if that's your escape, right? I think it's very common with entrepreneurs, the work hard, play hard. You still have to look at yourself the next day in the mirror. So sure, maybe it takes it away for that night or that day, but you're still the same person the next day.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's like another, I was just smiling to myself, like particularly the social chain days, because we just exploded, right? You know, we went from 28 people. You know, when I first worked with Steve and Dom, they were on a laptop in Thailand, and I did a Spotify campaign with them at another agency. You know, to 3 years later, I'm the managing director out in the US. We've got 200 plus staff, and we're just flying red eye. And the problem is, you get into a habit where you're like, I can, and this is where, you know, you often see it with high achieving C-suite individuals, whether they're founders or, you know, kind of C-suite corporate business leaders. They will almost medicate to a degree, and so it's like you're almost self-sabotaging to create an excuse. So it's like, I just closed this pitch, you know, I won't say the name, but I closed a pitch with one of the biggest brands in the world, and we'd been out all night, you know, and it was like I compromised myself. Now when I reflect on that, and it was amazing, and it's like, cool, I've ticked the box, but really I think I was doing that so that if it didn't work, I had an excuse.
Ah, interesting.
Right? And,
wow.
And it's the same thing, like I did High Rocks.
Yeah, me
right?
too.
Like, and this was last year, I did High Rocks. I went out the night before, you know?
That's fucking insane.
It's crazy. And this is why I say, like, I'm still a work in progress. But I did it because I realized I was nervous, and I knew that if I got through it and delivered it, well, great. But if I didn't do it as well, I had an excuse. And so what I've realized is, where's that come from? Self-worth. Right, I've got really low self-worth in terms of my own personal. I wake up every day, you're not good enough, you're not achieving.
Still.
Yeah, like, I'll be completely honest, I worked till 2:30 in the morning last night, and I was up at 6, right? Like, and like that, I feel great. I'm not drinking. I'm very motivated at the moment. We're flying as a business, but actually the reason I work so late is because I was like, I didn't get enough done in the day. I wanted to do this podcast, so then I had to factor in more time. And actually I had a check-in with myself in the morning to go, hold on, that's old Sam sabotage mentality. How am I going to actually, that's not sustainable. How do you turn up? You can be like, and this is what I mean about noticing these moments. I think as a CEO and founder, or anyone that really wants to live, like, you work so hard, like you're always on the phone, you're always hustling, but you do have to make sure that you have a bit of grounding time to make sure that when you get on an important call, or even just for yourself personally and mentally, if you're not giving you that time, if you're not going to third space, having a gym, getting in the sauna and reflecting, you realistically, particularly sleep, like when you haven't got a good amount of sleep, you're just not going to deliver in the same way.
No, people who say that they can exist on 4 hours of sleep, I just don't believe it scientifically. I just don't think you can operate on 4 hours of sleep to your max potential. You can maybe operate, but you're never going to feel as good as you would feel after 8 hours, right?
Yeah. And I mean, social chain, Steve and I, we used to sleep in the office. You know, we'd go to the gym at 2:00 in the morning, like after finishing work. Like, I have never known a work ethic and like a kind of resilience and commitment to success that social chain has had. And I had to be very careful when I came into Buddy, because I'm really proud of the mentality that I had it anyway. And I think that's why, you know, I was made managing director, and we had a very successful journey to most parts. But like, we were all breaking, all of us. And I think, Steve talks about it in his book. He talks about having to make massive life changes. And I had to make massive life changes as well, because it is just not sustainable, or it is, but you need to compromise your health, like physically, mentally, your relationships, you know, both from a love perspective or your partner, but also your friends, your family, the people that you want to connect with. Because whilst you need to sacrifice, particularly in the early stages, you've got to decide what is important and like long term, you know, and we can kind of go on to us talking about the ikigai, but it's like, what is your purpose? And like, what is it that when you're on your deathbed, no one gives a crap about the awards you've won. No one gives a crap about how much money you've got squirreled away, you know, or the yachts that you've got. They care about memories. They care about your family members. You care about how much value you've added to other people. Because I think really, for me, and why I'm really excited about doing podcasts like this and prioritizing it is like, if this affects positively 10 people, I've added value, and there's something greater than just running a really successful agency.
Do you look back on the days then when you were working? Social change, that's the name of it, right?
Yeah.
Are you type A? Are you a workaholic? I mean, how do you classify that? Because I'm assuming you're probably the same way now. You just have better ways to implement the balance.
Do I? I think I was an equity shareholder. Right, so it was in my head. You know, I live with Steve and Dom. We were building that business together. Like, you know, another thing like ADHD, which we'll get onto, but like, you know, dyslexia and ADHD. But like, huge parts of that are like justice, loyalty, and just generally, again, like this whole thing that I've grown up with because of being let down by so many people. I never want to let anyone down, and I'm fiercely loyal. To a lot of the times my detriment. And so I think I always have been a workaholic because self-worth, I need to prove myself, you know. And like another thing that's hilarious about achieving success is I remember saying to myself, you know, make my first million and like, you know, I'll be happy. And like, I was like talking about hitting 5 million. Like, do you know what I mean? You're immediately looking at 5 million. Now I'm like, right, cool. When we get to 10 million.
There's two different types of founders. And I think there's probably the one who's like, cool, I'm chill. And then there's the you who's just that naturally ambitious. But some of it is probably self-sabotage, right? Because like, are you ever really happy? Is that even relative?
Well, you know, the happiness things is difficult, right? Like, you know, we were talking before this about, you know, this whole thing between like Jeff Bezos talks about like work-life balance. It doesn't exist, but like he supports work-life harmony. And the idea is it's like, if you find a career that you love, that you can deliver purpose or value that makes you happy and makes other people around you, or can connect you with a passion, like you're gonna lean into that. You are gonna work longer than 8-hour days. You're gonna be doing 12, 14-hour days, 60, 80-hour weeks, like at times 100. If you're gonna be really honest with yourself, like 100-hour weeks like are not uncommon when you're launching a business, because you have to lean in, which means the weekends, it means the evenings, it means early mornings. It doesn't mean that that's healthy, and I'm not supporting that. I'm just being honest around Buddy wouldn't be where it is. You know, I've taken no investment, so this is just homegrown, with some amazing support around me, of course. But if you don't kind of have that balance of like understanding of work-life harmony, I think you'll always have a divide between like living your life with your family and your friends and then having your work life, and it won't work. I don't know, you must have that experience. Like, you're so driven, your business is flying, what we're doing now is a passion, but it's also part of your job.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's quite interesting because I feel like when you're going through the motions, and I'm really interested about what you say about self-sabotage, because I don't think a lot of founders hone in on that enough. And I think that work-life balance, that work hard, play hard mentality, I always believed in that so deeply. And I mean, I still do, but I used to kind of do the same thing. Like, to me, celebrating something big happen would be like going to a dinner or getting drunk or doing something that, like, to me, I felt like I could do this because I had succeeded in some way, when in reality, there's so many other ways to do it, like going to a dinner and sure, going out with your friends, but you don't need to drink a ton to like celebrate. And that's not a matter of leaning into this like whole sober, curious culture. It's more like, why is that such a common way that people feel like they should celebrate when it comes to business? I think it's just because it's so hard to exist and run a business stress, and just sometimes the escape is like alcohol. That's the drug.
Yeah, so it is a really good point. I mean, you know, we, like, our first, like, meet was, you know, a gym session followed by lunch, right? And, like, it was this really positive, energized, healthy moment. And the reason why I suggested that was, you know, actually I'd previously done it with another contact of mine, and it was like the most incredibly positive thing that allows you to connect and kind of leave it all on the floor in terms of the gym. So you kind of have gained this like unique respect. But I think the self-sabotage thing, I mean, let's face it, it's not just alcohol. I think this is I'm quite passionate about this, obviously, because of my childhood and like having to deal with it and also coping with it myself. But like drugs and alcohol and sugar and vaping and all of these things that you do to compromise yourself mentally, physically, in my personal opinion, they are all plasters behind a deeper trauma. Right. And I genuinely believe that as a child, you grow up with a perception or a learned perception of who you are, whether you're worthy. You know, it's that whole analogy of, I've got to get this right, but, you know, a lower class and a higher class child is taken to the dentist. Mm-hmm. Have you heard this one?
No.
And the lower class parent says, look, when you get in to the dentist, remember, you know, if it hurts, just stay still, you know, don't cry, don't do anything, just listen to them, right? Just listen to that person. In the higher class person, more educated, more experienced, who says, look, if you've got any questions, you make sure you ask them, you make it, you know, they work for you, we're paying for that time. And this mentality of like, that's two people at the same age being given different messages about how to grow up. And I think and the reason I'm saying that is because I got brought up to not feel worthy. I didn't have the attention or the support. I was also ADHD and out of control. I didn't know I had ADHD until I was 20, which is something we can go on to. But I was also then so chaotic that I was overwhelming to other people. So then what happens when I go to see my friends or I go and see my cousins, my family, they are unconsciously or consciously removing me or separating me or putting me in a box to say, well, Sam's out of control. Mm-hmm. Sam's the troublemaker. Sam's mischief is, you know, I don't want my kids hanging around. You know, I was never a bad kid in terms of like, I always got on but I was always getting into trouble. I was always energized. I was so constantly in need of stimulation and hitting my endorphins that when people removed me from it or subtly put me down, it created this self-worth issue with me. So then I bring that up to an adult. So then what happens when my business is failing, we're potentially going bankrupt in the pandemic or, you know, the tech recession, when that happened and 4 of our biggest clients just pulled, like Farfetch, for example, lost 90% value in shares. You know, we're doing 150 grand a month or whatever it was with them. Like, you think about that impact as a small business owner. Well, hold on, we're going to lose the house because the mortgage. I'm going to look like a failure because we're going to lose the business. People think I'm rubbish because we haven't got enough clients. The team are stressed. All of a sudden, it triggers my self-worth of not being good enough. And then my immediate go-to is the bucket's filled. I'm going to go out and absolutely deploy and make my life 10 times worse. And I know this is quite a long-winded way of explaining, but the more that you can look into the triggers that you've had from a child and actually recognize them, address them, understand them, the greater the chance of being able to deal with self-sabotage as you get older.
Yeah, no, you're very right. And I mean, there's so much in there, and I love that you bring in the mental health aspect, which I want to get into at Buddy, because there's so many founders who lead with the, again, that you should all be working and working so much, and they don't think about the employees and what it's like for anyone, especially at a startup. But I do want to say one thing, and I'm going to look at the camera to say this before we get into it, because I think you brought up such a good point, and specifically about culture, and I think being an entrepreneur. It was in April, and I said for the first time, I think yesterday on my Instagram, that I did get sued over the past year, and then I got canceled in April, and my mom came to London, and I thought I was losing my mind. I mean, I was in what I would consider hell, and I had never experienced this form of hell before, and it went on for months. And I went to Malta, which is super strange, like with my mom for a trip, and I was just acting, I think, near psychotic. I was so angry and so mad at just everyone. I couldn't have a conversation with my mom. I was like high and low and crying, and like rightfully so. I was 27. I was getting sued. The internet went psychotic over something that was a mistake. I thought my life was over. And my mom looked at me and she said to me, and she's like British and 75, and she said, "What the fuck is wrong with you? You go to therapy, you meditate, you work out, yet you're acting like this." And she said, "Whatever you're doing isn't working." And over the past months, I've looked back and I thought, like, wow, she's so right, because it's great to meditate and have a routine and work up. And I was religious, and I am routined with that routine. However, that doesn't mean you're living. You can do all of that, but like, does that make you really happy, or are you doing those things because you think that's keeping you sane? And I look back and I think that was me thinking it was keeping me sane and grounded, but in reality, what I really wasn't doing was just living, was like waking up some days and just going for a walk, skipping the meditation, like skipping the workout, just having my mind be free. And I think people, when they're in business, it's so hard to just exist, but sometimes you just need to like exist. It doesn't mean meditating or going on a run. That doesn't make you healthy all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, obviously hearing it again, you know, that is, you know how bad it can be when the press turns on anyone. I remember we just did a campaign with Joe Wicks, Move with Aviva, and he talked about how his ADHD was triggered by fast food, right? And I've never seen such an attack on one individual, like to the point where if someone wasn't really strong, and as you've dealt with, like you genuinely would be concerned for their own mental health, and we've seen it, you know, like we've literally seen it in the press recently. So I would say like what's really interesting around this is like, firstly, that's tough love from your mum, and she's there to support you, but also it's like sometimes you just need to be given that time and that support to kind of get over it. But the big thing that I smiled at is that I've had times where I've been so resentful and so angry, you know, to the point where it corrupts who I am, my happiness, my soul. And I think there's a huge there's a huge issue with stuff like that, where you're not being mindful. By the way, my phone's going off there.
It's either one of us, but it's fine.
Is it?
I can't hear it on the microphone.
Can I not? Should we go?
Yeah. Is it yours? I think it might be mine. I know.
There we go.
I'll edit it out.
Edit.
Yeah.
Classic social media.
Mindful.
So we were just talking about that moment with your mum. So I think like essentially what's really interesting about that whole situation that you went through, first of all, it's like heartbreaking to hear, because I know what it's like. You know, we had a real issue that we had to deal with actually recently with Joe Wicks, where we were doing a campaign with him, and he came out and talked about how he felt his ADHD had been triggered by processed foods, right? And the media attacked him. And it's like, you just feel like you want to crawl up and hide, right? And you feel like everyone's out to get you. And it's very difficult to find a way to kind of come through with that. The big thing that I found is that in those moments, resentment can manifest like to a point where it is so toxic that it corrupts you as a person. And I've had it where I've just found myself talking in a way that I would never ever want to talk. And you know, there was a moment, or there's been moments in my life where I've particularly had to you know, check myself on that. But I would say you've got to decide, do you have the time? Is there enough time on this planet for you to be spending negative, toxic, resentful, attacking someone else in defense of your own insecurities? Or is it more important to sit down, check on yourself, go, that fucking hurt, that was horrendous, how do I move forward, and what are the things that I can do, and how do I make peace? The big thing for me, like, you know, that ironically, the thing I haven't said is that, you know, when I was at Social Chain, my stepdad then died of basically liver failure from alcohol, and I hated him so much during those years. I found it so difficult to deal with him, and the resentment was there, but I had to just let it go. I had to allow that to go so that I wasn't creating this narrative. For example, I could say how bad he was, but actually he was just a broken child that didn't get the support that he needed, and he tried his best, and actually he's not with us anymore. But there were good times that he added, and bad times, but actually that doesn't dictate how I move my life forward. And I think, going back to your kind of earlier question around how I'm implementing that into work, I've really noticed, there was this stat, you know, the NHS released this statistic to say that there's been a 68% increase in 12 to 19 year olds being submitted in for urgent mental health issues, right, in hospitals. 68%, right? That is our next generation, and is estimated to continue, right? So we've got an issue where healthcare services are at capacity. We have had a next level spike in more cases of our next generation. And I am seeing that impacting now, both on parents within my business dealing with children that are having challenges, or partners where they're genuinely having mental health issues. But I'm also seeing it with the people struggling to deal with the stresses of life, coping strategies, not looking after themselves. Because of this, a bad thing happens. And I actually read a book called The Ikigai, and if you haven't read it, I would strongly recommend it. But it basically helped me realign and say, well, look, this business that I've created, Social Chain, but Buddy Media, the whole goal is to do really powerful, purpose-led, impactful activations that genuinely change the way people experience life, or the way that they can connect with a brand in a really powerful way. And to be able to do that, I need a team and a company and a culture that genuinely try and have positive impact and supportive culture and embrace key values, because you can't live in a marketing world. You have to have that in your operations. And I always challenge that when a brand comes in and say, we want to win an award for driving impact with our customers. And I immediately say, what is your operational strategy and your product offering that's going to allow to do that? Because we can go and sell it, but people will see straight through you unless there is a deep-rooted operational goal that's going to achieve that. And so with Buddy, I thought, Jesus, I'm selling all this stuff and I'm not implementing it. And actually our culture 18 months ago was a bit toxic. You know, I had the wrong people in. I hired based on skill, which is important, but not as important as value and cultural fit. And so then toxic people that were high skilled workers were essentially impacting a wider group of people and decreasing the value and decreasing the retention rate of my staff. I felt shit. I was drinking more because I was dealing with negative energy, negative moments, negative clients, because you attract the wrong clients and you create the wrong type of relationships. And so I decided to bring Ross Anderson in, who is basically a resilience coach and a psychologist that talks all around how you can find purpose, how you can improve sleep quality, improve your personal relationships, both with the people around you but also yourself. And the funniest thing that happened was he said the problem is you to start with. So the first thing was just like, you're the problem. The CEO is always the problem, right? Because you dictate everything from the top down, right? So if you set the wrong type of values or tone of voice, you need a team around you and a board to help guide that and make sure you do it right. So we actually went on a journey where we started looking at my own personal resilience, the way that I turned up. You know, if I was stressed or particularly tired, do I block out the morning to make sure when I turn up to the office I've got energy? I don't know if you've ever had that moment where a leader walks into a room and heads down and they are just pissed off, furiously typing on their phone or whatever. That will kill the energy.
Call it a leader.
Yeah, and that kills the energy.
Yeah.
That percolates through the teams. That then goes to the clients. All hell breaks loose. And so he's helped me really try and figure out how I can turn up. And I still get it wrong all the time, but I'm getting better. But then he's working with the team individually, and we just took everyone to Portugal on a resilience and well-being boot camp all around purpose. There was a lot of resilience. It was certainly a lot of fun. But the ultimate goal from that is, do we actually align with our values? And since that, I don't think we've got like a 95% retention rate in the last 12 months from keeping staff, because I think we're actually listening to them.
You mentioned about finding your purpose, or like not knowing what your purpose is, something earlier in this episode. Looking back, do you feel like you had to go through everything you went through to, quote unquote, find your purpose? Because it's this overrated thing. Like, how does a young person find their purpose? You also, fun fact, your cousin started a very big company called Casper. So I feel like entrepreneurship and success is ingrained in your family. There's something about you both have started massively successful companies, right? So I think that's really interesting. Another person, Sarah Blakely, who's the founder of Spanx, her brother is also like a wildly successful. I mean, she sold that company for, I think, $1 or $2 billion, and her brother is this very well-known entrepreneur. So I think there's something about certain families, and I think it's cool that you both, are related and have this background. But when it comes to finding your purpose, how do you feel like you found it? If you could look at the camera and say, like, this is how to find your purpose, what would you say?
Yeah, I think firstly, Buddy Media and Casper are two very different spectrums.
Sure, but still successful, right?
Yeah, definitely successful, but Target, seeking to acquire Casper for $1 billion, and Buddy are quite different. But you're right, like John, his brother, is a founder of Hydrant. Luke's gone on to launch Block Renovations, which is now £500 million business. Like, we've got some very entrepreneurial people within our family. I think I'm looking at that one. Yeah. I think the biggest thing for me is that your purpose comes from being really deeply honest with yourself, and taking the time to write down and journal and think about what truly makes you happy. Like, I know it's like a bit of a, people have said this all the time, but it's like, what would you do if you weren't paid any money, but you could do it every day, right? And, for me, it's helping people, right? Like, I don't feel that I had the help or the support or the guidance that I needed or should have had as a child, and I am now in a position, or certainly building a profile that allows me to help those people. And so every time I do something like this, every time I do the newspaper talking about my experience with ADHD, and I get feedback knowing that people are genuinely positively being impacted, I feel like I'm connecting with my core soul, and actually you realize that all the deals and all the awards that you do, that you get, that's all byproducts of actually what true happiness is. So I would say never look too far away from helping others, because I think to serve is the greatest honor in life. To serve, to genuinely try and add value to people. And look at ways that you can do that, and you'll be so surprised at how quickly that kind of support comes back to you. I would say take time to journal. Like, I hate trying to get me to journal with someone that's got dyslexia and ADHD is hilarious, but every day, or certainly most days, Ross has taught me to do three things, which is like, how do I turn up for the people I love, I lead, and I inspire. And then at the end of the day, I go, how did I do? And it allows you to stay focused on the present, because someone like me, and I think a lot of CEOs and a lot of people that are desperate to achieve self-worth success, you spend your whole goddamn life living in the future, and you realize that 2, 3, 4 years just fly by, and you've actually just not really focused on the journey. And really a lot of success is about really enjoying that journey and being surrounded by people that you respect and care about.
I want to wrap up with 2 questions. One would be, how have you survived entrepreneurship while having ADHD? You also said you have dyslexia.
Oh yeah. Mum's bred a good one. Being honest, I think ADHD has really helped me. Dyslexia not so much, and I'm still exploring the different elements of it, because dyslexia has superpowers as well. Like, I get in trouble for talking about superpowers, but I genuinely believe, 5% of the population in the UK are neurodivergent, right? That means that we think, feel and act differently to 95% of the population, right? And I think that allows, for me, what that has allowed me to do is I'm always thinking, and I've got to be careful about being in the present. I'm thinking 2-3 years ahead. We're doing a campaign which is involved in the World Cup next year, and I'm already thinking about the second World Cup and how we're integrating that and tying it together in 6 years' time. Like, I always see ahead, and that allows me to be creative and lead better, right? People that provide a clear vision, clarity as to where we're going, that allows you to inspire and lead a team in a better way. And so I think my ability to communicate, like, if you asked me to write down these feelings, I'd be here for 3 hours and there'd be a shitload of spelling mistakes, right? But I think ADHD in some ways has hindered me. The late nights often come from not being able to sit down and focus. I have to do admin work at night because I can't communicate, I can't call people. I can sit there, like, that was a lot of the stuff that I was doing last night was, it was payroll, it's month end, admin, VAT, all this stuff that no one kind of talks about when you're winning awards. And the dyslexia part of it, I think what that's taught me actually is innovative ways to get support on things that I can't do. And the definition of a leader is empowering other people, right, to achieve success for the collective good of that business. And I can't write proposals. I can't do, long kind of structured emails or plans quickly. I can verbalize it. I can get people and I can guide them on it. But I've almost had to get kind of lazy to some degree because otherwise it all won't be as efficient.
But that's where good founders, they outsource, right? You're not good at that. You don't need to be good at that, right? So you can find somebody to do it.
I'm actually banned from touching. I'm banned from touching proposals.
Yeah, word of advice. If you're bad at it or you have ADHD, ban yourself from what you're not that good at and find somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
And then, so with Buddy, because I never actually directly asked you, but you did mention something about sales, and I can see you being like a fucking monster when it comes to selling. What exactly does Buddy do? And then last question on top of that would be like some pieces of advice you have for sales. How do people close deals? What do they do wrong? The short spiel in the best way on how to sell like Sam.
Jesus.
Let's start though with what exactly is Buddy?
Yeah, so Buddy Media is a social marketing agency. So we focus, like, our core thing is trying to bridge the gap between creative and performance. I think there is a massive challenge right now in the market where creative agencies are amazing at telling stories but can't drive ROI, and media agencies are incredible at driving ROI, but they lack the storytelling that's critical to drive sales. And so I've tried to bring Georgina Bajarski, who's our media director, ex All Response Media. I've tried to bring a media agency and a creative social agency in together to integrate. And that allows us to tell powerful stories, big, high impact moments with typically purpose-driven concepts that drive results through paid social and amplification.
And sales.
Sales.
Over the years, I mean, you said at the beginning you were like doing red eyes, closing these deals. I mean, what's the way? How do you cold call, cold email? What's the best way to go about this? Say you've got a startup and you don't know how to get in the door. How do you get in the door with cold calling, with sales?
I would say if you know, number one, if you're going to create an agency, like if you're going to create any business, there is nothing more important than oxygen for that business, right? And the way that you can drive maximum oxygen is to lean on your own expertise. You are the business leader. You understand the business more than ever. You hopefully understand the industry more than ever. Otherwise, you picked a hard challenge. So you should be out there networking, connecting, opening doors, bringing it in. The resource side of it is critical for delivery, but that's something that you can bring support in to do. But if you're not bringing that oxygen in, so I think the number one tip, one of the biggest mistakes we ever made at Social Chain is stop doing new business because we were inundated. We just won global awards, inundated, and then the pipeline dried up, things changed. And all of a sudden we had this massive headcount in the business and 3 months of zero sales coming in and loads of clients dropping out. So regardless of tactics on sales, never stop the oxygen coming into the business, never stop connecting, marketing and outreaching and engaging, right? Like even things like this opens the doors to either helping you hire people to come in and support you to deliver, or people listening about some of the work that you've done to work. In terms of sales tactics, like I've never been asked this question. I always think about how I would deliver it, because the reason why is you've got to be careful with like psychology, and actually you've got to be careful that it's not a form of, I wouldn't say manipulation, but you have to mirror people, right? You have to understand, you have to connect with them. And I would say that, you know, 80% or certainly 70% of a moment is through your energy, your connectivity, eye contact, rapport, the way you're sat. Like, I don't know if you notice, I put my knee up, you put your knee up.
Chill.
Right? But we're mirroring each other. Changing your tone of voice, right? I've got you there, haven't I?
No, I'm laughing.
I've got you, yeah?
Yeah.
But changing your tone of voice, elevating, bringing it down, having dynamic, asking questions. But the big thing, I think cold calling is great and it works. If you want to build a relationship with a big global brand and have positive impact, you need to be connecting with them, right? And by connecting, I mean, do you genuinely build rapport with someone to the point where you're adding value to them, right? Number one, best sales strategy, add as much value to that person and focus on how you can improve their life. Because guess what? If you figure out how to elevate someone within their brand, help them achieve their goals, help them get promoted, help them win an award, help them look and feel great, they're going to stick with you. They're going to give you more opportunities, because again, life is to serve. And I think so many people, and it's like How to Win Friends and Influence People, that book, best sales strategy book ever, even though it's about relationships, rapport building, is focused on how are you presenting an argument that adds value to their life, but position it a way that by supporting you or giving you what you need, you're helping them. So yeah, I think cold calling is great, but I'm a very big believer of there is a core element of process, sales pipeline management, auditing, and making sure you're specific and you're targeting focus. But there is nothing more important than building relationships, adding value, exciting the client, and ultimately, biggest thing is how do they solve their problems.
Sam, this was by far, I think, one of my favorite interviews out of 200 plus. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will link everywhere people can find you or connect with you in the show notes. But where can people get in touch with you the easiest?
Just, hit our website up. So it's buddymediagroup.com.
Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for watching another episode or listening of Dare to Be Fearless. A new episode of the show drops every single Wednesday. And if you are a guest who has an amazing story, in particular, if you happen to be a female founder who's been in business for 5+ years. I'm very interested to hear from you. So send us a DM on Instagram or send me an email with your story. And if you do want to try out Chief Swag, you can use the code ChiefSwag10 at chiefswagofficer.com and get your own custom mic covers. I'll see you back next week for a new episode of Dare to be Fearless.